So I wanted to do a series showing how to go from a green screen to a finished scene in Blender, but I gotta break it up. This one's motion tracking. Motion tracking is one of the keys to transforming a small set into a large one, or putting your characters into entire digital worlds. It's this incredibly powerful tool for low-budget indie filmmakers, since it's one of the best ways to merge real life with your digital creations, the computer stuff. The Blender tracker's crazy powerful, but as many have noted, it can be a little intimidating to get into, so let's just blast through a first pass so you can wrap your head around it. Open up a motion tracking interface and load in your footage. Make sure the scene frame rate matches the frame rate of your footage. Hit Set Scene Frames to make the scene match the clip length, and Prefetch to load it into RAM. This makes it all more responsive. There's lots of motion models, but for big shifts like this, perspective makes sense. I'm going to go to the middle of the clip, since it's more likely points visible there will also be visible at the beginning and the end. And I'm going to go through and control-click on points with identifiable patterns, like bits of moss or paint or bright pieces of gravel. Hit A to select them all, then track them in a direction. Great! Now go back to the middle and track the other way. A couple didn't make it, but we only need 8 good ones for a track, so I'm just going to delete them. Jump on over to the Solve panel. I'll let Blender pick the keyframes, and I'll let it refine the focal length and the K-twins. Hit Solve. 1.08 pixel error. That's actually pretty good. I can turn on the info checkbox and see what the average errors are. Ideally less than 1. 5, delete it. 1.1, delete it. Resolve it. 0.2 pixels, that's real good. Yeah, let's use that. I'm going to set it as the background and set up the tracking scene. That drops it all into the viewport, but it doesn't know which way is up. Select the point and make it the origin. That'll be the center of the scene. Select 3 other points and make them the floor. Great. Put your monkey in there and go tell your mom, because this is very exciting. But it's rarely that easy. I mean, it can be. It is. That only took a couple minutes, but it was a pretty optimal situation. Want to know a secret, though? Whenever you can, whenever you're shooting, try to make it an optimal situation. There'll be times if you're doing it professionally when a client might give you footage and you just have to work with what you got. The other half of the time, though, they'll bring you on set specifically to make sure you're getting what you need. So, try to keep the shot steady with minimal motion blur. If you can keep the aperture small, you'll have a deep depth of field with a lot more points in focus. Make sure there's stuff in the shot you can track. If you're not sure, you can put little pieces of tape up, but little like rocks and pine cones can work too. Ideally stuff you don't have to paint out in post because that makes your life harder. It also helps to know how this all works. Like say you had a bunch of lights on sticks in your yard, and you walk around filming them. Some dots are closer and appear to move faster than the lights in the background. That's parallax. You give it to a computer and say, "Hey computer, I bet you can't tell me the camera's movement just by looking at these points of light, you idiot." And the computer goes, "Why are you being mean to me? I'm a computer, this is easy. There's only one camera movement that could explain the changing of these 2D points relative to each other, here you go." That's why you want points in different areas. If they're all on one wall, for example, the computer has trouble knowing if, say, the camera's just rotating around or if it's actually moving around because the pattern of dots stays the same. So let's try a more complicated example. So I filmed this with Caitlin, and we live out in the woods, but I want to make a bunch of sci-fi films, and sci-fi happens in the big city. So perhaps this is a problem we can fix with motion tracking. I sure hope so. So we could do this the same as the other one. Pick our tracking points and babysit them and clean them and all that, and there's a lot of great tutorials out there for how to do that. I've linked some of them below. But I want the computer to do the work, so new motion tracking layout, set the frame rate, load in the footage, set scene frames, prefetch. I'm going to go with a location motion model this time, since most points we're tracking are just going to be points on a wall without too much perspective shift. And now the good stuff, auto-detect features. I'm going to lower the threshold to like 0.01 and the distance to 80. Woo! Then I'm going to start tracking forward. Look at him go. But as the camera moves, some trackers are disappearing and we're seeing new empty space. So I'm going to hit escape to stop, detect more features, hit A to select all the previous ones, and keep going. Just brute forcing it. Whenever they start to disappear, I'm going to add some more. Some of these are going nuts. Let them have their fun. Before you know it, you're done. Look at this wonderful mess. Great, we have data. Let's clean it a bit. If you slide open the graph, you'll see some lines are going haywire. If you click them, you can see the corresponding point. Yeah, that's no good. You can click on those and delete them, but Blender can also do that automatically. Jump to the Solve panel and click Filter Tracks. I'm going to slide this number up until only the most extreme little guys are left. Delete them. Graph's a lot cleaner now. You can also eyeball it. There's a few on her, those obviously aren't good. There's also places where a foreground edge will intersect a background edge. These move as you change perspective, so that's no good either. Great, let's try to solve it. This time we're not using auto keyframing, we'll set our own. Pick 2 frames that have fairly different points of view, but contain 8 or more of the same tracking points. Something that demonstrates the parallax. If the track solve's taking a really long time, or you're randomly getting these huge solve errors and banging your head against the wall, a lot of times tweaking the keyframes will fix that. Refine the focal length in the K-twins, and let's go! A few seconds later, 1.3 pixel error, not bad. Now that Blender has a solution in mind, we can compare it to the tracked points. Let's just click Clean Tracks, and if we're lucky, we can put in a reprojection error of 1. This will select any points that drift more than a pixel away from where Blender would expect them to be. A lot of times they're doing something a little bit weird. In this case, it's selecting more points than it probably should, so I'm going to put in 3 pixels instead. Delete the selected points and solve it again. Hey, less than a pixel, that could work, but let's dial it in. Clean it with a reprojection error of 1 and resolve. Hey, less than half a pixel. That's great, excellent. Click Set as Background and set up the tracking scene and it's ready to go. But remember last time we selected the points on the ground to orient things? This one doesn't really have that, but we can add some real easy. Go to a place with a good view of the floor and Control-click on a few trackable zones. Now that we have a good camera solve, you only need to track a few frames to snag the position. Resolve, and look, your points appear. This is really handy for lots of stuff, especially reconstructing the environment. So, select your 3 points and click Floor to make a floor. Then set your origin to be the center of the scene. If you can find a point that's along the same axis as the origin, select it and hit that axis, and Blender will get everything straightened out. Look at that, oh jeez. Head into the layout workspace, we've got our animated camera. Open the overlay panel and turn on motion tracking. Now we can see our points. This is a tracking tutorial, not a modeling tutorial, but let's do some stuff. I'm going to start modeling a wall, using the tracking points as a guide, mostly just extruding stuff out. If you want more tips on modeling environments, you can check out the modeling buildings tutorial linked below. I'm also going to model a rough interior, matching the layout of the back wall, and I'm going to put our footage on it. So create a new material, give it an emissive surface, and let's make the base color an image texture. Load in your footage. Crank up the frames, hit auto refresh, and we're going to set the vector to window, so now the footage is going to fill the whole camera view. It's a bit weird that it repeats, so change it to clip. There we go. If you line things up right and made the geometry of the wall match the points, you can now tab into edit mode and just hit K to use the knife tool to trace the window. Delete that face and hey look, it's a window, it actually kind of lines up. That's cool. I'm going to import an image and put it way in the distance. Sky isn't tall enough, so in edit mode I'm going to add an edge loop and just stretch that top bit up. Yeah, that's cool. Next I'll block in the apartment details a little bit. I'm going to create a new material with an image texture and load in a good wall image. Next I'll select all the faces and hit U, Cube Projection. If I open up a UV panel, load in that same image, I can select faces and drag around the ones that don't work until I like it. We're at peak, draw the rest of the owl here, but honestly this part was a slippery slope to begin with. So, there you go. It's really fun to be able to scroll around and see it all in real time in Eevee. We could spend a lot more time on it, but we put our house in the woods into the big city. Also goes to show you only need a back corner of a set. Everything in front you can add digitally without green screens or anything. Although, speaking of green screens, I'm working on that tutorial next. Also, stuff's crazy over on the Patreon. Started a few weeks ago. I've got breakdowns and I've got tutorials and modeling stuff from photos and lots of 3D assets and behind the scenes. Hopefully a lot of bang for your buck, and you get to help me finish some films and get these tutorials made. Huge thanks to everyone who jumped on board already. You've made some intense weeks significantly better. So I'll see you soon.